Hey, and welcome back to the Business Real Talk. On this episode, I'm going to show you how you can get people to buy faster so you can decrease those sales cycles all without more live events or more marketing. So let's get real. Now, I'm going to take a wild guess, guys. And I know that you probably are tired of spending months trying to nurture your leads, hoping that they're finally going to say yes. And you want to actually be able to see exactly how you can take somebody from cold lead to buyer in less time. I'm talking about the industry average is somewhere around 90 days. Let's talk about how we can decrease that to as little as 7 days. Now, what you're going to want to know is that I'm going to break down for you the 3 steps of what actually gets your ideal clients to buy faster so you can spend less time marketing and selling and more time getting your clients wow worthy results. So let's talk about step one and understanding how to have the right people. So right now, your audience consists of 3 levels of intent. You've heard me talk about this before, but what I want you to realize is that when we want to get people to purchase faster, we need to not only recognize those different types of buyers within our audience now, but also understand how that reflects in our marketing so that we bring in the right type of buyers going forward. And this is the foundation of getting people to buy faster because you need to understand the formula of what really gets people to buy quickly. It's intent plus desire plus solution equals speed. Now, we cannot manufacture intent or desire. This is the biggest mistake I see people making when it comes to their marketing. Now, here's a great example so you can see it in motion of what trying to manufacture intent and desire looks like. Imagine that you are a personal trainer and you're at the gym and you see a stranger in the corner and you walk up to them and say, "You really need to lose weight if you want to be healthier because you'd be really attractive if you just lost 20 pounds. You should hit the treadmill more often and that way you can lose the weight and find a man." What that shows is where we're trying to manufacture desire and intent by creating what's known as aversive motivation. Now, you're probably cringing just hearing that statement I shared with you before. But what if I told you that most of the marketing that you're being taught to replicate is using tactics just like that? So, I'm going to go over some quick marketing tactics that are probably already being used within your business and explain to you how you can actually reverse this so that you attract the right type of person. Now, the first is what we call fear based marketing or pain based marketing. You see this all over the internet. It highlights what could go wrong and how that's going to negatively affect them in hopes that by doing that, we're increasing their desire to solve for the problem. Now, you see this oftentimes with insurance companies that have those really painful commercials where they show a devastated family who's unable to afford their home after the husband and head of household dies in a car accident. Now, what they're doing is they're using fear based marketing to create aversive motivation in hopes that it creates or increases desire of their potential client. The second type of marketing we see is where we emphasize that loss aversion. Now, businesses use this concept by framing their offerings in terms of what customers stand to lose if they don't choose their product or service. You see this in a lot of bro marketing and pushy marketing tactics where they're essentially trying to state for you, what are you going to be missing out on? And is it worth it to you of having that cost? Number 3 is negative social proof. You may see some businesses do this very subtly. They employ a version of aversive motivation by suggesting that if you don't use their product or service, that it could lead to social embarrassment or missing out on social trends. A great example of this is a marketing campaign that might imply that by not owning a particular new version of the smartphone, it means that you're being left behind. Now, we can raise desire without using manipulative techniques or trying to pressure people into something using non-ethical approaches, but it does require work. And stay tuned because in the next episode, I'm actually going to break down how you can get those lurkers and fence sitters to move to a yes by raising desire without those manipulative tactics and pressure marketing. So let's talk about first understanding how we recognize buyer types and how we then can leverage that to optimize for each type of buyer so that you can get faster decisions and more yeses. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Every person's audience consists of 3 levels of intent. Number 1 is the highest level of intent. These are people who love making quick decisions. They thrive in fast moving environments and they love to trust themselves in making really gut based decisions. They're the visionaries, the leaders, the people who know what they want and they will move mountains to make that happen. Let me give you an example of what a high intent buyer looks like. This is somebody who wakes up on a Monday morning and decided that they want to get better at writing copy in their business. So they spend the next day researching the best copy coaches, their process, and by Tuesday, they've hired a copy coach. I equate this buyer to James Bond. They're great at making split-second decisions and they do well under pressure. So here's my question to you. Do you find yourself being the James Bond buyer personality? And are you speaking to more of that James Bond personality? Now, a second version of your buyer types are what we call mid-intent. These are leads that research and they're deeply analytical. They're the people who read the entire sales page twice and they take copious notes every single step of the way. They like things that are super visual, that break things down into complete detail. Features and benefits are their jam, and they will binge all of your content for the next 3 to 6 months. Now, they take their time when it comes to making that decision, and they want to be sure that they have everything they need in order to do that. They enjoy experiencing your genius firsthand so that they can get a real feel for whether or not you're the right person for them. They are rational and deep thinkers. So let me give you an example of a mid-intent lead. They met you 6 months ago and they've been silently listening and watching everything you produce. They'll often DM you to ask simple questions, but they're slow to move and you may have completely counted them out, but then one day they'll randomly sign up. This is what I call the mid-intent lead, and I equate this buyer to Sherlock Holmes. Now, what I want you to ask yourself, are you the Sherlock Holmes buyer? And are you specifically speaking to your Sherlock Holmes buyers as well? Now, our final version of buyer types are our low intent leads. These are the people who bounce around from one thing to another. They're easily excited and like to purchase low ticket offers, but will easily get distracted and will end up collecting dust in their mailbox. They're the window shoppers that love to look at everything and everyone and what they have, and they have piles and piles of notes, but it takes them ages to turn those notes into action, if ever. Now, a great example of this is if you haven't already heard the play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, I really highly suggest it, but it takes a reimagined look at Hamlet. And what ends up happening is Guildenstern spends the whole time grappling with indecision and constantly asks these existential questions and get lost in thought, struggling to arrive at a definitive conclusion. Another example of this that we've seen in one of our favorite shows, Seinfeld, is George Costanza. He struggles to make decisions. He's awkward and uncomfortable and just really feels like he's going from one thing to another. Now, what I want you to understand is, are you the George Costanza buyer? And are you speaking directly to those low intent George Costanza buyers as well? Now, what I want you to realize is that each different type of buyer makes decisions differently. And it's really important for you to not only address who you're speaking to right now in your marketing and who makes up the bulk of your audience right now, but also for you to understand who you want to attract going forward. All of them will move to the state that you want them to, but in different ways, using different approaches and different messaging. So I want you to recognize, which type of buyer are you currently attracting and do you want to attract in the future? Are you looking for James Bond high intent buyers? Are you speaking to the Sherlock Holmes analytical mid intent buyers? Or are you talking to the George Costanza low intent buyers who are bouncing from one thing to another? And is that who you want to be speaking to going forward? This is going to set the foundation for everything that you produce going forward and how you actually set your business up so that you can get the fastest decisions in your business right now. Now, as a reminder, your highest intent lead is going to be the one who makes the fastest decision, but they also make up the smallest portion of your audience, around 10%. Whereas your mid intent is going to make up somewhere around 35% of your audience, leaving your low intent to make up the additional 55%. So now that we understand what it really takes to recognize the right people to make those fast decisions, it's time to talk about the right information for the right buyer. So I'm expecting that at this point, you've already identified for yourself who your current audience is. Are they high intent? Are they mid intent? Are they low intent? This is going to determine what approach we take going forward to speak to the right level of clientele to get them to make that fastest decision. So we're going to answer the question of, what does your prospective buyer need to hear right now based on their buyer type in order to say hell yes quickly instead of I'll think about it. So let's break down the right information based on the type of buyer, starting with our high intent James Bond buyers. Now, these are the people who want the down and dirty, the Cliff Notes version of what you do, how you do it, why that matters, and how it happens. Those are the 4 core foundational questions that people are asking inside of your business model. Now, here's what I want you to know. you need to be able to speak to what we call the gap. You need to recognize that high intent buyers are sophisticated buyers. They're people who have done the research and they want to make easy decisions. Their biggest trigger is how are you going to help them get results in a way that expedites the process and how you've done it before for other people. Let me give you an example of a marketing message that specifically is tailored to your high intent buyer. The example would be, here's how my client lost 20 pounds in 2 months without going to the gym every single day. Now, the second version for sales messaging, this would be through a DM conversation on an actual sales call, would be, here's how we're different from other health coaches. Now, what you're seeing in these examples is that it includes the result that they ultimately desire. It also speaks to the expedited timeline. And lastly, it includes how you do this in a way that avoids something that they're adverse to. Now, you're tackling all of those core factors and grabbing their attention by speaking to their specific needs. This is how we get high intent leads to move into action and make fast buying decisions. Now, I want to clarify that that content needs to be clear and it needs to showcase for them exactly how it happens, AKA giving them the quick next steps so that they can make those gut fueled decisions. Now let's talk about our mid-intent leads. Now, knowing that your mid-intent and your Sherlock Holmes leads are logical and analytical, and they need to be able to feed all parts of their brain that makes that decision. Think of this as someone who's been burned before and doesn't want to repeat that same mistake. The right information for this person is going to be really honing in on why your process works, giving their brain proof behind why you're able to create the result that you promise that you can. Now, let me give you an example of a marketing message example. Here's why your trauma keeps coming back, even though you've done the healing. This not only tackles their feelings of why they are where they are, it also gives them the feedback and logic behind things that make them feel safe and confident to make a decision. This person does best with what we call a spiderweb version of content, things that can actually feed and increase their desire. So here's what I want you to ask yourself when it comes to approaching your mid-intent buyer. So here's an example of sales messaging for your mid-intent buyers. Here's how this has worked for over 416 of my clients. Another example might be, here's how my clients have created an ROI in just 45 days. Both are speaking to their analytical and deep thinking brains and giving them the very logical proof that allows them to feel safe and confident to make a decision, which leads us to our low intent leads. Now, I mentioned before that there's 4 core questions that your audience needs answered, but what we didn't talk about is that there's one question that kind of happens before those other things. And this is, why should I care? Now, I want you to think of your low intent buyer as someone who's being introduced to something for the first time. They're inquisitive. They're curiously approaching the idea to see how it might apply to them. Now, I want to be clear that while I personally do not teach speaking to low intent leads, I want you to think of this as that you need to be able to teach people why it matters. So you would say things like, why you need to lose 20 pounds, why you should hire a copywriter, why you're struggling to wake up in the morning. You're helping them identify the problem and possibly giving them the low ticket solution to solve that itch. So the marketing messaging example that you would use for low intent leads is 5 reasons why you should start a Facebook group. This wraps up step number 2 of understanding the right information that you need to be able to deliver to your right people that you have right now in order to make a decision. Now we need to talk about how you actually create the right process that allows them to make a decision right now. Now, we've all heard the old saying that timing is everything. And what we need to understand is that crafting the optimal timing so that your buyer type can actually make fast decisions is the next and third piece of the puzzle in order to get people to make purchases faster. Now, what you need to understand is that when we speak to the right people with the right information, it's now time to understand the right pathway that helps them make a decision right now. So let's break down how we create the right process so that we can get decisions to be made right now. Now, newsflash, marketing has changed. Advances in technology, changes in consumer behavior, and the widespread availability of information has made the old school tactics that so many strategies were built on no longer relevant. We used to live in a time where marketing required us to develop long sales cycles. Why? Because marketing required planning and timing because of the lack of readily available information. You weren't just picking up your phone or sitting at your computer to find a mental health therapist. No, you'd see a billboard or hear a radio commercial or maybe flick through a magazine and see an article that discussed how mental health affects mothers of small children. This required businesses to use broad mass market approaches that required raising that problem awareness and slowly creating brand awareness in hopes that down the line, the consumer would remember to buy. Marketing was built around long sales cycles in order to address this. But the speed of marketing consumption has changed. Our ability to meet people at the moment when they're ready to buy has changed. And therefore, the need to slowly get people from stranger to high ticket has changed. And the need to market to people from a low intent state in hopes to be top of mind, front and center when they're ready to be in a high intent state has changed. And the click of a button, I can research the top mental health therapists that support moms struggling with guilt available across the globe. And in hours or days, I can have a complete insight on which option is going to best fit my needs. And in the wee hours of the night, I can hit buy or book now without ever saying a word to someone. So, what you need to know to address this new state of marketing is that no matter which buyer type you speak to, there's two foundational concepts that get people to buy and buy quickly. The first step is understanding the emotional aspect of buying. And the second step is the logistical aspect of fast decisions, because ultimately, client acquisition comes down to supporting people to make those decisions as quickly, easily, and as friction free as possible. So, how we actually do this is addressing those two sides of the decision making process. Number one being understanding the foundation of decision making, that automatic and natural behavior that really equates to a easy yes. And what I want you to recognize is that we need to understand that every single person that you meet is naturally going to go through a process to make a decision. It doesn't matter if that decision is choosing what they should eat for dinner or deciding who they want to work with to help them build out a program in their business. The concept remains the same. Each and every person goes through a decision journey. Now, what I want you to know is understanding that we need to recognize that people make decisions when they feel safe and when they feel confident. Notice how I mentioned that both of those things are feeling based. That means that the logic that we feed them, i.e., your message, your process, etc., needs to make them feel those two things. We oftentimes don't think about that process, that psychology that goes into how your potential client comes to a decision. And every single person who enters your world goes through a process of steps that allows them to come to a decision and makes them feel safe and confident. Now, getting people to that decision and doing it as quickly as possible is completely up to you, meaning that you have the potential to set people up for easy yeses by strategically analyzing the psychology of their decision making and pairing that with an actionable roadmap that intuitively and effortlessly targets their decision making process and answers those inherent questions so that they can feel safe and confident to say yes. And the best part about it is you don't actually have to be in the room. You don't have to hold their hands in order for them to achieve it. Now, answering the natural questions that people ask is what allows you to help them make those safe and confident decisions. But how you do it and what approach you use is what's actually going to allow you to expedite those decisions. So let's break it down. Now, I want you to realize that the choice is ultimately yours and how quickly you're going to get people to buy in your business. You can answer the questions I shared above, and you can do so over 10 months, 10 days, or 10 minutes. Now, I want to come back to those three buyer types that we mentioned before. Our high intent leads, AKA the James Bond leads, the mid intent leads, AKA our Sherlock Holmes leads, or our low intent leads, AKA our George Costanza leads. Now, I want you to realize that you can support those three different types of buyers to make decisions, but you need to be able to meet them in their process of how they make those decisions. Now, a quick example, I recently realized that I needed an ad strategist in my business to better support our scaling efforts in the ads process. Now, it took me less than 10 minutes to find someone and book a call. I'm a perfect example of a high intent buyer, and therefore I love to attract high intent buyers as well. But what I want you to realize is that as a business, you get to decide who you want to cater to and how you want to cater to them making those decisions, but you need to be able to meet them in their decision-making process in the way they actually approach those decisions. This is why we've created the only system that effectively supports your high intent and mid intent leads simultaneously, allowing you to get your best buyers to make the fastest decisions. So let me explain how this works so you can see in action how you can actually leverage this within your process to support your clients in making decisions as well. So in our Infinite Sales Highway, we have two lanes. Lane number one is meant to support our high intent, those James Bond buyers, so that they can make the fastest decisions and the safest and most confident decision possible using our bingeable sales system. What this does is it allows us to cater to our high intent buyer so that they can binge the information they need through short on demand trainings that specifically target their natural decision making process in matter of minutes. Now, we recognize that mid intent buyers make decisions differently than our high intent buyers. So, we can't give a mid intent buyer the same approach and process that we would a high intent buyer and expect them to make the same decisions. So, what we do is we leverage our one touch content system that allows us to feed their analytical and more controlled decision making process through a weekly client acquisition system. What this does is takes the way that we mimic those decisions, but does so over 5 pieces of content over a 5-day period of time. It effectively answers their questions, allowing them to make safe and confident decisions that meet their specific needs. So, what I want you to realize in what I shared here right now was that in our high intent leads, we presented information quickly and briefly in a way that allowed them to just understand the information in a clear enough way where they could feel confident and safe without being overindulged in too much information. Because too much information for your high intent leads will leave them running. Versus our mid intent leads, we recognize they need time, they need experience, they need to see each piece of the puzzle laid out individually so that they can get to that point of saying yes. So, what we do is we leverage a strategic content system that approaches those decisions that they're going through naturally over an extended 5-day period of time. What this allows your prospective client to do is be able to take that one piece and really feed that analytical and logistical side of their brain and sit with it until we add the next piece on top of it. This allows for your prospective mid intent lead not to get overwhelmed and not to feel like they're being pressured into a yes. And as a result, it allows them to buy in the matter of a week. Now, your low intent leads that we haven't discussed here are going to be a completely different process that you're going to take them through. This is going to look like a lot of the typical marketing you see right now, things like ascension models and going through long challenges that will ask them to spend hours each day going through a process, but allowing them to make small little moves throughout the process. So, what we've really addressed here today is that the way that we get your prospective clients to make the fastest decisions possible is to understand that there's just 3 steps that each individual buyer type goes through. The first is understanding and recognizing the right type of people. I want you to walk away from this episode and ask yourself, what type of buyers do I currently have in my audience? Do I have James Bond buyers? Do I have Sherlock Holmes buyers? Do I have George Costanza buyers? I want you to send me a message over on Instagram at Next Level Up CEO and just tell me, what type of buyer are you currently speaking to? And I want you to ask yourself, is this the type of buyer that you want to specifically speak to and cater to as you're going through the process going forward? Because remember, while getting the fastest conversions right now means that we need to address and speak to your specific buyer types that you have right now, doesn't mean that you're locked and loaded to that and that you can't make changes. You get to evolve and support the people that you want to make the fastest decision going forward. Again, for us, we focus on high intent and mid intent leads, meaning that you'll notice that none of the information that I share is really catering to the style and types of low intent leads. I don't share a ton of how to content. I don't try to get people to understand why they should care about something. I'm speaking to a problem they're fully aware of. They have an intent, they have a desire, they're looking for solutions, and therefore that creates speed within the buying process. In step 2, we address why it's so important to speak with the right information to those right types of buyers. Each type of buyer really needs the right information in order to make a solid decision that allows them to feel confident and feel safe. It's your job to really address the right information based on the type of buyer that you're looking to support. This is why it becomes so important to have a sales process in place that moves your audience along a repeatable and consistent process so that you're not standing there trying to figure out every step of the process along the way. Step 3 is understanding the process that's going to help and support the right type of people with the right information to make a decision right now. We recognize that each buyer type consumes the information that they're gathering in a different way, allowing them to make those decisions. We discuss what it looks like and how we leverage a 2-pronged approach to allow our audience to make those decisions as quickly and effectively as possible based on those buyer types. Now, what I want to share with you is everything I've shared with you here today is exactly why the EZS method is so effective and why it's the only system of its kind to support your two highest buyer types, your high intent and mid intent, to create those automatic conversions on the back end and get your leads to sell themselves. Remember, this takes into account three core factors that allow us to achieve this. Number one is that you need to be the right kind of solution to your highest intent leads. This is why the very first thing I do with my clients is identify what their innovative advantages in the market space. This allows us to identify where the biggest opportunity points are so you can plug in your innovative solution to solve for that problem and become the only and incomparable solution in your market space. This allows you to make your competition irrelevant, and you can charge 5 to 10 times more with clients lining up to say yes, which leads us to what we've already discussed here today, which is having the sales systems that allow your buyer types to make the fastest decision possible. This is what we call our infinite sales highway. Using a dual lane approach, we're able to support our highest intent leads to make the fastest decision possible by creating a bingeable sales system that automates those conversions and gets your leads to binge their way to a yes, while also supporting your mid intent leads using our one touch content system, which allows them to go through an incremental sales process over a 5-day period using your evergreen content system. Now, the third and final piece is actually being able to deliver results for your clients at scale. This is what we call the pure profit strategy of results and retention. This allows you to understand how you can create an offer at scale that delivers results without any hiccups so that you can retain your clients long term. If you want to learn how to apply everything I've shared with you here today and how this can be actually built into your business using our EZS method, I want to invite you to a growth optimization call. This call is done with me personally. What we're going to do is review your current process for how you actually bring clients into your business, and I'll showcase for you exactly where your biggest opportunity points are and how we can actually build it to scale so that you can get more easy yeses, faster decisions, and automate those conversions. You can book your call right now at ezsleads.com/call. But if you want to learn a little bit more how our EZS method works and how you can get your clients to binge their way to a yes using the Netflix effect, I want to invite you to check out our free private podcast over at ezsleads.com. Now, until next time, here's to keeping it real.